Alright, so in this video, we are going to talk about blade templates and create a layout file that would be shared among all the other views. And we are going to see two different ways to create that layout file. But before we do that, I'm just going to show you the extensions that can be quite helpful, and I'm using them too. So the first one is this Laravel blade snippets, which is very handy, and I recommend installing this one. The second one is a Laravel extra IntelliSense, and the last one is Laravel blade formatter. So only these three. All right, so let's go back to our folders. Under resources, we have views and this welcome view. So again, this is the page we saw in the browser. And a blade template is actually very easy to work with, and it's very powerful. The syntax is pretty much like Vue.js. We have these curly brackets to output dynamic data, and we have directives that all start with an @ sign and end with an end statement. So for instance, just want to show you this one. If we had an if directive, we would end it with an end if. So let's delete everything here. So I'm just going to get rid of it and create that HTML boilerplate again. And let's just add something here. And I'm just going to say hello. So we have something on the screen. So let's give it a refresh. And the server is not running. So let's go back to the terminal. Make sure we run this PHP artisan serve. I forgot about that. Sorry. Now, if we give it a refresh, we have that hello up there. Let's just have a few examples before we get into building our layout. For instance, this title, I want to grab the title from the env file. So I want the title to be this app name. So whatever the value of this app name is, we want to use it as our title. In order to output a dynamic data, we use double curly brackets, and we can write any PHP code we want here. For instance, there is an env helper function. So this will output env variables. And what we want, we can pass it here as a string. So we are looking for app underscore name. All right, so we see Laravel up here. And now if we go back to our env, and let's just change the name to my app. And I'm using quotations here because I have a space. So if we come back here and give it a refresh and zoom in here, we have my app on the title. So this is quite simple, and you can use this syntax almost anywhere. So it could be used on the attributes like this within the quotations, or just outputting data between the tags. Also, we have a lot of directives. So if we just type if, for instance, Laravel blade snippets can help us to create an if else block or just an if block. So let's create an if else block, and it works just like any other if else block that many programming languages use. So let's say if it is true, we want to output this hello. Otherwise, we want to output bye. So we would see hello if we give it a refresh. If we change this to false and then give it a refresh, we get bye. So we can see all of these directives if we go to Laravel documentation and just search for directives. And we have these blade directives under blade templates. And you can see here we have conditionals, we have authentication, we have loops, and environment, and all sorts of directives, and they are very, very handy. Now, before we get any further into building our layouts, you notice every time we make a change, we have to refresh the site. That's because we are still not using Vite. Laravel ships in with Vite, and we can use it for our CSS and JavaScript. Now, in order to use Vite, in the head tag of our main document, we need to add the Vite directive using @ sign, and within the parentheses, we need to pass the directory, the full directory, to this CSS file. So we need to go inside the resources folder and then CSS and then app.css. So if we wanted to link our JavaScript, we can turn this into an array and add another element and just change this path. So we want to go to JS folder and then app.js. So we're not going to use this JS file, but I just want to show you how you can add it if you wanted to. So as soon as we do this and save the document, go back to our website, give it a refresh, we get this error that says run the dev command, because now we are using Vite, which is part of JavaScript. So I'm just going to create a new tab here, and we need to install the dependencies first using npm I or install. And then when that is done, we can just run npm run dev. So now Vite is watching our document. Now let's go back to the website and give it a refresh. And if we change this by here, which is the one that is being rendered, let's just add something and save it. It's already outputted, so I don't have to refresh the site anymore. So if you want to use plain CSS, you can just add it to this app.css, and this would be rendered on the screen. So if you just change h1 tags to red, of course they are red. But as usual, I'm going to use Tailwind, which actually goes well with Laravel. Let's go to Tailwind installation section. We want to go to framework guides, then Laravel, and make sure Vite is selected, and we want to copy these commands. So then back to our terminal, I'm going to break this process and then paste those commands, and while that is running, I'm going to go back here and just copy these texts that needs to go inside the Tailwind config file. In our project now, we should have this Tailwind config, and we can paste those directories in here. And the next step is to copy these directives. So I'm going to copy them and just paste them inside app.css. And if we close this one, and let's just get rid of everything here, just add an h1 with the class, let's say text for Excel, and just say hello. So that's a Tailwind class, of course. And back to our website, give it a refresh. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to run npm run dev. So give it a refresh. There we go. So we have Tailwind installed, and Vite is watching our documents. So like I said, we are going to use a layout file because we don't want to repeat this head tag and the navigation on every page. So let's create a new document under views. I'm just going to call it layout.blade.php. Then I'm going to grab everything from this welcome view. So I'm going to cut these and paste them here. We want to have our navigation. So let's add a header and a nav. And I'm going to move this h1 in this nav element, and let's just change the text to nav. Then under header, I'm going to have a main tag, and this is where the content of different views should go. So I need some sort of a placeholder here. In order to add a placeholder, there is a directive, and that is called yield. This directive takes a name, and I'm going to call it main. And this is now like a placeholder for a section with the name main. Right now, we don't have anything on our site. We are not showing anything because we are rendering this welcome view. If we go to web.php, which is under routes, we have this function that is rendering welcome view. We haven't talked about routes. We will do it in the next video, but I just want to show you that we are rendering the welcome view, not the layout view. So in the welcome.blade.php, we need to extend this layout using an extend directive that will take the name of the document we want to extend. And now we have to say, for example, this h1 needs to go in place of this yield. And for that, we have another directive that is called a section. So a section takes the name of a yield, and whatever we pass within these directives, it's going to go in place of that yield. And we can have as many yields as we want. So now if we refresh our site, we get nav and of course that text hello. So this is one way, which is the simplest way, and we need to repeat this process on every view that want to share this navigation. Now, there is actually a proper component in Laravel. So let's go back to the documentation, and under Blade templates, we have components right here. Components are actually a proper class. So it comes in with a PHP class and a Blade view. So if you go to this section, we can create a component using a PHP artisan command, and this will create a class that is quite similar to this one. And we can have our functions here or the logic that component should have. But there's an easier one, which is an anonymous component. So an anonymous component basically is just a view. It is just a Blade component. So it doesn't have a class, and it is quite easy to work with. And there are two ways to create one. So let's go to the terminal, and I'm going to create another tab here because I want these two processes to run. If we take a look at PHP Artisan, it gives us a bunch of commands, right? And under make section, we have this make component. So let's run make component with an edge flag. So this edge flag will give us information what we can do. So it will create a component class, but we don't want the class. We just want the view. So if we run that command again, make component, and give it a name, let's call it layout again, but we want to use the flag view because we don't want the class. We want to make an anonymous component. And press enter, go back to the project. Under resources, now we have this components folder with this layout blade template in it, and it has nothing but a div. So this is basically an anonymous component. Let's say I just want to have something simple here. So I want to create an h2, and I just want to have the text my component. Now, in order to render this in this welcome view, we need to use this special tag, which is kind of like HTML tags, but component tags all start with an X. So it's X dash, then the name of that component. So we can have a self-closing tag, or we can have a proper closing tag like this if we wanted to add something in between. So let's just see this in our website. We get my component text right here. Now, basically, we don't want to repeat all of this. We want to use this anonymous component for our layout. So let's grab everything from our layout file, which is in the root directory of our views. So I'm going to cut everything and go to the layout component. So it's under components and we have a layout file, and I'm going to paste all of that. So if we save this one and delete this layout file, which is empty now, and in our welcome template, we are going to add this hello text inside these layout tags and then get rid of all of these directives. We just want to get rid of them. We want to get this hello in our layout. And at the moment, we are still using that yield. So of course, we get only the nav text, which is coming from here. So we are not outputting this h1 because this yield is looking for a section with the same name to output something. But we are now using a component. So instead of this, we can just use a special variable, and that is a slot. So inside the curly brackets, we can use this slot variable, and if we save it, now we are outputting that hello. If we look at our welcome view, we don't need to repeat that extend and section directives over and over and over again. So every time we want to extend our layout, we just have to use these tags. Now, this is the simplest component we can have, but they are in fact very powerful. We can have named slots, so we can have as many slots as we want. We can also have props, just like Vue.js or any front-end JavaScript framework. We can have props here, so later on we will create our own components with props so we know how it works. But basically, we just add the props directive up here and we pass whatever prop we want to use. So as I mentioned, there are two ways to create an anonymous component. One way was to use the artisan command, which is the proper way. The other way is to just manually create it. All we have to do, we need to create a file here. I'm just going to call it demo.blade.php. So as long as this document is under the components folder inside the views folder, we have an anonymous component. So if I add anything here, let's say demo, and want to output this in this welcome view, I can do the same thing. I can just say x demo and then self close it, and back in our website we have that text. But I'm going to delete this. This was just a test, and also this one. So we're going to create our navigation now, which is basically just HTML and CSS. And I'm just going to add some CSS here that I've already prepared. All right, so just this one. It's nothing fancy. It is just CSS classes for buttons and nav links and so on. So in the layout file, I'm going to just create an A tag with the class of navlink. And this is going to be the home page. And then we will have a div, and then I'm going to copy this link 2 times. We will have a login and a register button. Then I'm going to add some classes to the body tag, some darker background and the default text color, and some background for the navigation itself with some shadow, just make it look nice. And on this div that has 2 tags, I'm going to add flex, items center, and gap 4. Then on the main tag, I'm going to add padding Y8, so padding top and bottom, padding left and right 4, then MX auto, so that is margin left and right auto, because I want it to be centered, and max width screen large. So that's our nav, and I'm zoomed in here, of course. So the next step is to create our routes for login and register. So we're going to talk about routes now.